Whatever. Cool.
Cool.
Hello. Hello.
Hello, Paul. It's been a
Yeah,
while.
it has been a while. I've been doing a lot of sleeping and nightmaring.
How apt? Oh, how
Oh,
you been?
yeah, good, good. I'm excited. This is our first live feed with CineMarks. Thank you to anyone who's joining us live. This will be cool. We'll see what's going on. We're gonna mark out for the 1984 Wes Craven classic Nightmare on Elm Street, which
Mhm.
if you haven't seen Nightmare on Elm Street by this point, it's a must watch. And where the hell have you been if you haven't been? And we're not talking
Well,
about 2010 either.
hell no. That I think I've said to you before. The only good thing about that movie is Kyle Gallner, Quentin. I think his character's name is.
Yeah, I agree.
He's probably the best actor in that movie. No disrespect, to Jackie L. Haley, great actor, but not a great Freddy. I think we can agree.
Uh, yeah, just I feel like how do you know, how do you step into those shoes, especially if the writing isn't all there and the production isn't all there either. So Platinum Dunes, I think they did some really solid remakes. I think their Texas Chainsaw is one of the better chainsaw films in that whole series. I liked the Friday the 13th that they put out as well, but um, a
Yeah.
real a real swing and a miss with the 2010 Nightmare on Elm Street. Which I is it true they haven't even attempted another horror film or remake since then, I think. So
No, I mean the reboot they done. It was a planned trilogy,
yeah.
but I remember going to the cinema to watch it, and it was I think I was dating my wife at the time, so I don't think we was married yet, and we went to go and see it, and I remember falling asleep watching it because it was so boring.
Oh, and she still married you, so that's how you
Yeah,
knew she's willing to
she
go to
was the
this,
one.
and she's willing to give me another date after I fell asleep. She
Yeah,
must be a
we'll see.
well,
So
when do you remember first seeing Nightmare on Elm Street? Like, from now on, we'll simply be referring to it as the only Nightmare on Elm Street. Uh,
hmm. I was a kid. I must have been 4, maybe 5 years old. Uh, about the same time I became a wrestling fan. Yeah, about 5, maybe 6 even. But I forgot which was the first one I actually saw. It might have been the original,
really?
but yeah, might have been the original. It was number 3. It was one of them two, definitely. And I remember seeing Freddy and literally the stuff of nightmares, obviously. But I remember seeing it. I'm like, fuck. I wasn't swearing at the time, but I missed the days of being a kid watching a horror movie when you used to hide behind a pillow and you used to hide your eyes when you used to watch it,
Yeah.
and just terrified. Honest to God, I was scared to them. And obviously, in America, they still have Planet Hollywood. I would imagine so.
Uh,
No.
that's a good question. I'm not sure.
All right. By the way, chat, thank you for joining us. We'll answer a few of your questions at the end of the show. So this is your chance to ask us a question before we become monetized. But anyway, so over here in the UK, in London specifically, they opened a London chain of Planet Hollywood. It's completely changed now. I think now it's like a little tiny cafe, but back then it was actually like a big restaurant. And in the front room, there was like some memorabilia. There was like Annie's jacket from the Terminator, scissors from Edward Scissorhands, and such. Anyway, you wait at this reception bit and you walk through and you see all these pictures of I went screw it must have been 1997 or something, so I saw all these posters and stuff like that, so I was already aware of Freddie by then. I was about 8, and my mother said to me, look at the ceiling, James. And I looked and there was a big like picture of like Freddie,
Really?
and I was like, scared to death eating my burger, and I kept looking like that.
What was
Um,
it, hovering over the dining room or something like, like
it was, it was like fucking, like M- Michael's fucking like painting on a Sistine Chapel.
oh, man,
but
The Freddy
it was like,
mural.
yeah, it was like Freddy and like all these other movie characters. But one of them was Freddy. I remembered, and yeah, from being 4 or 5 year old till 12 year old, every night was a nightmare. Used to wake up screaming, and yeah, just literally the stuff of nightmares. But it's so weird now because now I love it. It's my favorite horror franchise. To me, Freddy's the greatest horror slash slasher villain. I know everything there is to know about the franchise. Um, Spoken to you off camera. I've got ideas for a script to make. You've got ideas yourself. Something we might depends, guys. If like and subscribe, get CineMarks off the ground, and people might take notice of us. But I just love this franchise. Except the remake, Freddy's Dead had its moments, but the
Come
rest
on,
of them,
that's awesome, man. Freddy's Dead was
I mean,
awesome.
I love Carlos. Carlos is great. um, but yeah, I just love the franchise and like everything about it.
Would you say Freddy is the kind of the hell? I don't know. Would you compare him to as far as like the ultimate heel in terms of all the you think of like your Mount Rushmore of
Yeah, I
villains,
mean,
heels in horror cinema, and I think it's people will have their opinions on different ones, but he's certainly front and center in my opinion. I think same for you, but
he's part of the big three. It's him, Michael Myers, and Jason. They are the big three. Who the fourth is on that Mount Rushmore? Up for debate. Could be Leatherface, could be Pinhead,
right.
Chucky, you know, even
Chucky's
Ghostface Scream.
in the bottom. Chucky, yeah, Chucky. It's just like
Yeah.
his top of his head, because so yeah, I agree.
Well,
But he's definitely, to me, he's front and center, because he he encompasses everything that a villain should, so much to the point. I mean, he's almost like the Ric Flair of the horror world, in that he's such a heel, but also became like such a great talker
mm,
that throughout the course of the series, everyone, he is the main character. Like everyone loves him. Everyone loves
yeah.
Freddy. And so, was that the original intent? Doesn't seem like it, but it certainly erupted that way. And it's interesting to think back on how it all kind of began, and just in seeing interviews with Wes Craven, how it the influences that kind of morphed themselves into this Freddy Krueger character. And it's it's really interesting because it's a lot of it's based on things that Wes Craven encountered as a young kid. I think he was growing up in like Cleveland, and how we've heard that story, how he was at home and looking out the window because he heard someone shuffling along, and he looked, and there was this older man in kind of like a trench coat, and he had like the fedora, and he was walking along kind of just where you can just kind of look at somebody and you can tell that there's something bad about him. And the guy
Yeah.
kind of sensed that Wes Craven was looking at him, from up in the window, and he turned and looked at him and kind of like spooked him, and he jumped back, because he was scared of being seen, and thought like a few moments had gone by and figured sure enough he had walked off, but then he kind of peeked back over, and the guy was like waiting and like really stared in at him and freaked him out even more. And I remember seeing or hearing somewhere where he said that he had heard that the old guy go in through the front of his
Upstairs.
go up into his building. Like he heard the front door of his building.
Yeah. Must have been an apartment he had then.
Yeah, coming up his stairs and then walking down like his hallway. And like, man, that is terrifying. I don't care how old you are.
Hmm.
You see some suspicious old character who takes delight in scaring you, and
Yeah,
that's frightening. And that's the essence of what became Freddy Krueger. Was that it was taking a delight in
that's
scaring you.
that's what sets him apart. And I don't get me wrong, love Michael Myers, love Jason, love both them franchises. Not so much the recent Halloween movies. That is a topic for
No,
another day.
no.
Um, but that's what sets Freddy apart. It's the psychology of it. He's not just a guy goes around killing the babysitter or killing someone who's, in his neck of the woods. I guess kind of so, but you know what I mean. Invaded his territory. There's Freddy. This before Freddy became Freddy, when he was just still like a regular. Well, I say a regular guy, but you know what I mean. When he's still alive. I mean, the original script was that he was a pedophile, but Wes Craven changed that last minute because there was some cases that was going on in the real world. Coincidentally, they actually brought that aspect back in the remake. Um, so instead, they just went for he was a child killer. And that's what made him so evil because he enjoyed kind of like playing with his food and and when he became Freddy in the nightmares, that was the thing. He enjoyed scaring us and just the delight he gets from it. Whereas in most of the other slashes at the time, they was just there purely just to, for the body count.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. It was like, if I recall, I can't remember the name of the school, but it was like a kids' school, I think, in Southern California. Um, Possibly, yeah, near Redondo Beach, I think. It was like a kids' school, and there was a few of the kids that had come out saying that they were being molested and brought down into these tunnels underneath the children's school, and they were being molested by the. Oddly enough, it seems as though, if I recall, that all was a work. Like they ended up
Mm-hmm.
finding out that the kids were being put up to say this stuff, but at the time, because it was getting such national coverage, that's why they, like you said, they changed it from him being a pedophile to just a child murderer.
Yeah.
So just pick your poison. I mean,
Yeah,
so
like which one's worse?
Jesus,
Yeah, I don't know. They're both
that's
pretty fucking bad.
Jesus Christ. But
But
that's, again, yeah, I agree. I think that's what sets him apart from the other. It's like with Michael, he's Michael and Jason are similar in that they have, it's kind of more of like a family connection, you know what I mean? Whereas like
yeah.
Jason's like avenging his mother getting beheaded, and so don't you dare smoke pot and get caught banging at summer camp at Camp Crystal Lake, or even go into his woods or anything. Um, but but well, hell, even though we saw later on and Jason Takes Manhattan, I guess it doesn't really matter if you're at summer camp or not. But but then, like with Michael, he's trying to get Lori, he's trying to get his sister, and if you're in the way, you're in the way. You're fucked. So, but with Freddy, you know, it it's it's the connection to the town, and how all these parents, grouped up and cornered him in the junkyard and killed him and burned him alive.
Mhm.
Um, and so throughout, once that first wave of Elm Street kids are done, it doesn't matter because there will always be kids in Springwood, right? And so he'll just keep going through the generation of them, and they're all, you got to move. You can't move to Springwood. You're asking for it. So
Or in part 6, everywhere there's an Elm Street.
I mean, yeah, which is interesting, right? Because that's, in hearing those interviews with like Wes Craven, he was teaching at a school and one of the cross streets was Elm Street. And then
Yeah.
also that's, side of like the Kennedy assassination. And so, yeah, Elm Street, there probably is an Elm Street in every town. Um, you
Yeah,
know,
I would imagine so. Yeah,
every now and then I'll
but
even see Elm Lane or Elm Road, and I'll think that still counts. That
yeah.
still counts. That's an extension, So, um,
So, so I mean, before we talk about some scenes, we're not going to go through the whole movie. So we're changing the way we do things a little bit just to keep it a bit more streamlined. That's why we're doing live streams now, everyone, because Paul editing a 2 hour video, man. Thanks for that, with you.
what happened? The going through the last one that we did.
Oh, it takes it for you now. What do you call it? I am in the process of getting the laptop. I've got this guy who's going to give me a call, hoping to get one sorted out next week. So as we go along, I'll be able to throw some pictures up and things like that. But that's going forward. But yeah, I mean, before we talk about some of our favorite scenes and stuff, I mean, we'll talk about some of the casting. So Robert Englund, before he done this, he done a couple of like some horror movies, I guess, or some films. But I suppose his main role, where it was like semi-famous, was the TV series V. And originally, what was the name of the other guy who they had in mind for Freddy, but scheduling
Yeah,
conflicts?
yeah. It was so they originally had cast David Warner,
That's right.
who was a much older, English actor, and to the point where he had like the prosthetics already fitted to his face, and they did a couple of just test photos, and he was the original Freddy Krueger, and he was cast because that character that Wes Craven had seen on the street was a much older guy, and so that
Yeah.
was his mindset originally, was to make Freddy an older guy. Um, and so they cast David Warner, and I guess from just by fate, unfortunately, David Warner had a prior film commitment, and he ended up leaving Nightmare to go do this other film commitment that he had already made. And so they started kind of casting a net. And as I think, as I've heard, like Robert Englund didn't actually even like audition. He came in and it was more of like a meeting. Now you're saying that he accompanied our 2010 favorite. Is that not the case? Is that not the case? Was that
No,
just
I'll tell you the full story down in a minute, but carry on the Robert Englund train, and I'll tell you the other story.
Yeah, so Robert Englund, he was hot on V. He played Willie, who was more of one of the standout characters, and that was putting a lot of money in his pocket, and so
Mm.
he was really banking on V continuing, and that's kind of where his priorities were. So in between, I think, seasons of V, his agent had him go and take a meeting with Wes Craven, and he was definitely much younger. He had, slick blonde hair. I believe he's from Southern California. He's from like Glendale or something, and he was doing a lot of surfing at the time. But, he was always getting cast as sidekicks, or as he put, hillbillies and bumpkins. He had appeared in, I want to say, Eaten Alive. It was like an old Toby Hooper. It appeared on your Video Nasties list, where
The, the,
old
the
guy
only
swamp
other the
alligator.
only other the only other horror movie I've seen, well, he's been in a few horror movies like Wishmaster, but from that period, I don't know if it was after Freddy or before Freddy. Um, it's set in space, and like Sid Haig's in it, and
Not Planet Terror. It's like it's something. I know
something
what you're
like that. And
Yeah,
there's
and
like
so
this 40-foot maggot like molest this woman.
well, this was like a big thing, right? Because he's getting called in for a meeting, and it's for the main villain. And he talks about how when he was in his car, he took, because he's a classically trained theater actor. He took some of the cigarette ash out of his car and kind of put it under his eyes a little bit to deepen his eyes. And he came in there and he didn't read any scenes. They had a meeting, and he says he went in there and it was kind of like a power play where he just kind of really just stared at Wes Craven for a few moments and just kind of walked a little bit. I think he had watched Nosferatu the night before and took some of that body posture, and that character morphed over the time, throughout production, the early part of production, as a lot of it does. But he was taking a few of these things and taking it into this meeting, and Wes Craven was really sold on the fact that Robert Englund relished that enjoyment of scaring him, and that's kind of what sold it for him. And so he figured, well, if we're putting prosthetics on his face, it doesn't matter if he's a younger guy, that I had originally thought of as being older. So, but it was just, it was just the atmosphere that he had brought to the room, of instilling that fear, but also enjoying that fear, because that's that connection to that old man that he had seen as a kid outside his window. So, it's pretty cool, kind of nice. The old days of just taking a meeting and not having to read anything and just, getting that essence from somebody and thinking, that's perfect.
Nice. But yeah, the other audition story. So when they was casting the characters, so Johnny Depp plays Glenn. It's his first major film. I think his first film, actually. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it is.
Right.
So he wasn't auditioning. He actually accompanied his friends to the auditions, and his friends turned out to be Jackie L. Haley, coincidentally played Freddy in the remake. That's the rumor. Apparently, that's the true story. And Wes Craven's daughter was with him, and she's because Glenn's character is a jock, so you imagine big guy, muscled up, American football player, and she saw Johnny Depp and she fell in love with him. She says, "Please pick him." And Johnny Depp's not exactly the biggest guy; he's a really skinny guy. And Wes Craven turned to his daughter, and it's like, "Really, him? He looks so sickly and pale." She went, "No, he's gorgeous. Please cast him."
It was like between him and somebody else, and maybe two other actors, I think, right? And he was like, "Which of these guys, like, did you?"
Yeah,
like, he's dreamy. And he was like,
that's
"Really?"
right.
So, to be curious,
she wasn't wrong. Look how he basically became like a teen heartthrob, like through all them years, and obviously he's one of the biggest actors of all time. Just as for Johnny, he was proven innocent.
It's cool that he talks fondly of that experience, and doesn't shy away from it, or he isn't like embarrassed about it or anything. So I think that's pretty cool.
Complete contrast to Rooney Mara, who played Nancy. She disowns it, like she's actually embarrassed to be in a horror movie. And
it's not about quitting acting from that.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, it was a terrible movie, to be fair. But that's the thing with horror movies. I think a lot of people do turn their nose up at them, thinking, "Oh, it's just like blood and guts and stuff like that." But Johnny Depp and the career he's had, like you said, he's thankful, and he's always spoken really proud of it and like looking back fondly on it. So Johnny Depp's a great guy. But so I mean, I guess we'll get into some of the scenes. So I suppose we'll first talk about the actual opening. So you're hearing the music, you see this, well, before the music kicks into place, got this atmospheric music. You see someone messing about with some tools on his table, making this glove, and putting together the finger blades and knives, starts wearing it, and, goes, rah, and you hear the tune, ding, 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 and you see him rip through a thing, and that's it. And that sets the atmosphere for like the whole movie, basically.
Now, was it Heather Langenkamp's who was brought in? I guess they had seen like every young actress in town, um, but Heather Langenkamp came in to audition for Nancy, and she hit that that bit of just being that kind of everyday girl next door.
Yeah,
Uh,
she wasn't. I mean, she's pretty, but not what you'd normally associate with like the scream queens. She
sure,
is literally a girl next door, like pretty, but not someone who you would see on the catwalk model, for example. You
right.
know what I mean?
Wasn't it? It was. I had seen somewhere or had heard somewhere it was like her boyfriend who was a musician or something. He was the one that maybe kind of he either did the it wasn't I don't know if it was the tune for Nightmare on Elm Street, but I think it was
One,
the
two, three's coming for you.
like the nursery rhyme of the one, two,
Yeah,
three. Because Wes Craven had written the that nursery rhyme down, but didn't know how to put like a tune to it. And
right.
I think that might have been her boyfriend at the time who stepped in and kind of added that tune to that little nursery rhyme that's lasted throughout the whole franchise. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, no, she was. That's the thing with horror films. They're going to cast unknowns a lot of times, for the most part, just because you don't have an idea about this actor or this actress. Sometimes well, often actors are they get so big that no matter what part they play, it's
Yeah,
difficult to meet yourself in that character because you're still watching. This is Dwayne Johnson as a fireman. This is Dwayne Johnson as a cop. This is Dwayne Johnson as a bodyguard. This is like, so you can't separate them. So
no,
they'll often cast unknowns, and because they're a lot more affordable, they're cheaper. You can pay them whatever because they're just happy to be working. Um, but you can get behind them. There's a chance you can get behind them more, and hopefully feel something for them more as they get picked off. And so I think Heather Langenkamp she was doing a show at the time, but still, she might have been the one who did some of the most in terms of that core cast of team that they hired. Um, but yeah. The funny thing about that intro that you were talking about is that hand making that glove at the beginning. It's Lou Carlucci who built and designed the Freddy glove, and so that's like his hand. Those are his hands at the beginning making that
right.
glove because he had fit it to his hand, and that's why he's working on it. And so it's kind of funny, people might think that's Robert Englund at the beginning, but it's Lou
Yeah,
Carlucci, one of the production designers. So yeah, it's pretty funny. But with the claw too, you think, um, what a crazy weapon to use. It's not a machete or a butcher knife or a chainsaw. What the hell is it, right? And that was one of those other things where, I mean, it's a real masterpiece of psychology. This whole franchise, this whole story, the whole thing, and that's part of that genius of Wes Craven. Having grown up in a religious, I believe Catholic kind of household, he took a lot of elements from religion. That's where a lot of the sins of your parents carry on, and I think like the
yeah,
demon will come, and a lot of those things are etched in religion. I'm not going to claim to know a ton about religion because I'm not of that cloth. But
I
but
am.
then you okay? So
I
you're
used to be.
for
I was brought up in it.
well, just so like with the glove and the claw, he was thinking back to what's the earliest fears of mankind, and associated that with, you know, primitive man, caveman, whatever,
Yeah,
being
like
afraid, like a
saber-toothed
giant
tigers and things like that.
bear and saber tooth, something with claws. And I think he had also seen his cat pawing at something,
Yes.
right? And so he started thinking, oh, something with like the claws on it, and um, apparently he just gave Lou Carlucci like one of these. It was like a tomato knife or something, and gave him like the blade and was like, "Can you make a hand or like a glove out of this thing?" And, pretty genius invention,
Mm.
So, and it looks great. Like if you look really closely, that first like the index finger glove, the blade is welded as though the character of Freddy had worked on it and broken it off and welded it back on. And so there's like a weld on the first bit, like the first knuckle of the index finger. And I mean, it just looks so rough and very industrial, but like something that a welder, uh,
Yeah.
a guy who works at a dirty factory um, would
Well,
put
that was
together.
Freddy's character. He worked in like a boiler. He worked in the boiler room like a factory, didn't he?
Yeah, yeah.
So
I
like a
mean,
steel mill. I
yeah,
know they've I know they've retconned it a couple of times, but I think that was the premise. He was kind of like a welder or someone that worked in like a steel mill sort of thing.
right, 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 right. Um, yeah, you see different forms of the factory throughout the boiler room, and um, I think there have even been hints that he was like a school janitor or something way later on, but I think that's like that was going way,
That's the
yeah, that was
remake.
like going way
Chicken
off,
away, chicken away.
way
Um,
offline.
but didn't the glove get stolen? Am I right in saying?
Yeah, I think from what I understand, I think there was a glove that was stolen on the. There was definitely a glove that went missing on the second one, and they kind
Right.
of held everybody. I think Bob Shea, head of New Line Cinema, he basically was like, "Look, like we have something that's gone missing from the prop department, and we need it to turn up, or heads are gonna roll." And he, yeah, not fucking around. But I believe, I believe a glove did go missing on the first one. I'm not exactly sure how many they made, but uh, clearly they had to make a few with prototypes and the hero glove and things that. But it's funny because you see collectors everywhere who claim that they procured the actual glove from this
Yeah.
film, or this is the actual one. And um, David Miller, who is the guy who was in charge of doing the makeup and all those things. He was one of the experts on designing a lot of the look of Freddy, and certainly did all the makeup for Freddy. Which I was going to ask you, if when you were at Planet Hollywood and you saw Freddy and got freaked out, if you were ever
Having
able,
pizza.
were you ever able to eat pepperoni pizza the same again? You
Oh,
know,
my eldest loves pepperoni pizza as well. And that's how they came up with the look of Freddy. He
yeah,
was having pizza and he was playing around with it, and that's how he came up with Freddy. Similar to Marvel Comics, Red Skull. I think the guy saw what was it now? Milkshake or an ice cream with like a cherry on top, and
really.
how it was. Yeah, it was like how it was melting or something like that, and he saw something, and they gave him the inspiration of creating the Red Skull. Same sort of story. But that's so good. So I mean, I suppose.
I think they had done makeup, like they had toyed with some different ideas, because he's having been this burn victim, and he, had studied actual burn victims, and it was almost like too
Yeah,
grotesque in a way that didn't quite hit. And so that's why when David Miller was just sitting there trying to figure it out. He was just kind of like messing around with his pepperoni pizza, and it started to really take shape in his mind. So
It's weird because that's exactly how they went for it in the remake. He does actually look like a burn victim.
yeah, but it's it's got bits of CGI in it, and
Yeah, it's not the same.
how to slap the pepperoni pizza on his face,
Yeah.
cut.
People's asking if this is live. We are live. At the end, we're going to be taking some fan questions, so
We're
please
live,
stay
pal.
with us. We're live, pal.
Yeah.
Uh, so I suppose we'll talk about the first, well, couple of big moments. I mean, one of the scenes I do like before we get to the first big scene is when they're over in Tina's house and Nancy's asleep, and all of a sudden she's got the crucifix on the back of the wall where she's sleeping, comes off, and all of a sudden you see this imprint of Freddy like reaching out through the wall, and she turns around and it goes back. All they'd
Yeah.
done to use that was cut a hole, some tights across it, some pantyhose, and just had him lean up against it. Genius.
And give me that effect over the CGI. Give me,
Yeah.
that. Yeah, I mean that those practical effects, they to me they still hold up, and they'll always look
Oh, yeah.
better. Anything in camera will always look better than CGI. That's one of the biggest downfalls of the 2010 was just the overuse of CGI.
Yeah.
But yeah, that effect is great, and it's this wasn't a very this was considered a low budget film, as are most horror films, and that's part of why there will always be an audience, because they generally don't take a whole lot to make a horror film, but chances are you're always gonna have an audience for it. There's something in the human psyche where it's exciting to be terrified, and if you're in
Yeah.
the safety of the cinema or in the safety of your own home, that's just what it is, but there's still that desire to be scared and to be
Yeah.
terrified.
It's weird, isn't it? It's like going on a roller coaster or something. It's just that adrenaline rush. But I know what you mean, like being scared. It's like you don't want to be scared, but you can't help it. You just enjoy it for some bizarre reason.
Right,
It's
right, right. Well, it's great.
so
It's a rush. It's exhilarating. It's kind of similar to what you were saying about how you miss the days of hiding behind
yeah,
something. And I think you and I both, as I'm sure a lot of anybody listening or tuning in, modern day horror. Say what you will about it. I feel that I'm not a fan of most of it. I
mhm,
feel we find ourselves going back to the classics and the films that we grew up with. But it doesn't mean that we just give up on it. We hope to feel that. We hope to get that fear inside of us, from something. It's doable. It is possible.
mhm,
But sadly, a lot of films tend to run with the pack of what's popular. I mean, think of like the countless rip-offs that came after Nightmare on Elm Street. I mean, that's one of the things. It's such a monumental film. It influenced. I mean, it really shifted the whole face of horror. You know,
yeah.
because yes, it's a slasher, but it's not. It's so much more than that.
Oh, it's its own beast, definitely.
It's more than that, right? And it
Um,
goes like the Wes Craven bit where, and not to cut you off, but just like going back on the psychology aspect of it, and the essence of realism and how it'll connect to anybody. Everybody dreams, and everybody's had
yeah,
nightmares, right? And so him, I think in the LA Times, he had seen some stories coming up about, I want to say it was a couple of like young Vietnamese
yeah,
kids or something who were having just horrible nightmares, horrible, like just violent, horribly horrific nightmares that was causing them to stay up for days and days and days at a time. But he kind of focused in on this one story about a young kid who, and this is all in the New York in the LA Times, and this was real. These were true coverage. You know, these real stories that he was reading um, about this kid who had been up for days, and his family was really starting to worry about him, and they took him to see like a sleep doctor, and they got him prescribed to like some sleep medication. And after like a few days, they finally were able to like put him to bed, and they thought, okay, great, like finally, like that's over with, and now he'll be able to like get some rest and slowly start getting back to normal. And they started hearing him like thrashing and screaming, and they went up to his room, and he was like kind of in a sleep paralysis for a moment, and then just like dropped dead and was just like dead in his bed, you know. And then they started finding that he had coffee, like a portable coffee pot in his closet, and he hadn't taken any of the sleeping pills. And so that was like really that seed that was planted for this whole thing to happen, this whole story, this whole masterpiece, if you will. It was all kind of based in reality. I mean, that would have been crazy, right? Like loosely based on a true story. You know?
Yeah, it's amazing. So I mean, I guess we'll talk about the first big death in the movie, and possibly one of the biggest deaths in the franchise. Tina's death. What a way to like, what a way to show the capabilities of Freddy. I mean, talk us through it. Like, you know, she goes in the dream, she hears a noise outside. People's like, why is she outside hearing a weird noise? I think sometimes people forget what it is a nightmare. You do stupid stuff in your dreams. And obviously, she sees Freddy, tries to run away. So in the real world, Rod wakes up and sees Tina's flailing all over the bed, and all of a sudden, sliced up in the stomach, and she's going up the walls and the ceiling. And
well, the amazing thing about
crazy.
Tina is that like she's the first character we actually see right off the bat,
and she's the blonde. So
we're sitting here thinking she's our heroine, she's our lead. It's like a total Janet Leigh and Psycho.
Yeah.
Very similar, right? Yes. So it's like the false lead. You're sitting there and you're thinking like, oh, this, and you know, she's killed in the first like 10, 15 minutes of the film.
Yeah.
I have to look back at the content, but yeah, and just an insane death scene. You know, that's one of the things that I think also really sets the Nightmare on Elm Street, but also just the following films in the franchise apart, or just how creative the kills are, and varying degrees of brutality. But Tina's death is easily one of the standout deaths in the entire franchise. And like you said, very gruesome, all in camera. You know, I think, I mean, there had to be some tiny bit of wire work. I'm not exactly sure how that worked with her turning in midair at that one bit, but yeah, like you said, that rotating room. So they took the was it Fred Astaire, I think, or something, like Dancing on the Walls or whatever.
Yeah.
They had this big room on a gimbal, and they were able to rotate it, and that's where she's, you know, and this is Amanda Weiss doing all this, and she's kind of tumbling around in this room that's rotating, so it's making it look like she's kind of getting dragged and going up the walls and up onto the ceiling and everything, but it was just this giant room that was kind of rotating. Funny enough, they would use it again in
Breaking 2.
Breaking 2, that's right. Electric Boogaloo. That's right.
Well, not very different genre of film, by the way.
They would use this on in the film too. We'll get to that in a moment, but they would use the same way.
But great scene, sets the like I said, the beginning, the intro of the movie sets the tone, but this death shows you like, right, this guy doesn't fuck around.
Right. This character of Rod, who's kind of like the rough Nick Corey. He was he was billed as Nick Corey at the time, but his name
Yeah.
is
Sugazia or Jazugazia, something like that.
I mean, it's hard. JSU is how you pronounce it. Is that first name? The spelling, but yeah, and he was using a stage name because he didn't want to get typecast as like gangsters, and I think he's Puerto Rican
So,
heritage.
yeah. So instead, he played an Italian up yours with a trailing lawnmower.
Yeah. I woke up with a heart on this morning. Yeah,
He's great.
yeah, and he was cast because he had soulful eyes. Like he had a real sympathetic quality to him, even though he's playing the bad boy
Mm.
and you know is falsely kind of accused of murdering Tina because he was the only one in the room with her. Um, but we see how distraught he gets when he's calling for her and he's trying to help her, and her body
Mm.
starts swinging around and nails him, and he flies into the lamp and kind of knocks him silly, and then she falls into the bed and her blouse gets torn open by something he can't even see, and then her stomach gets the claws open, like opens her right up, and I mean, that's insane
Mm.
to dream this stuff up. But he's sitting here in real life, seeing it happen in front of him, and that would put anybody in a mental hospital, you know.
Oh yeah.
So he freaks
I
out,
mean,
jumps in the window. He's on the lam.
so before we get to like the next big death scene, I suppose one of the big scenes is Nancy in the school. So that earlier that morning, she was watching the TV and she saw the image of Tina in the body bag. So she falls asleep in class. Lynn Shay is actually the teacher, Bob Shay's legit sister, and she's become a
Yeah.
bit of a horror icon herself, like starring in the Insidious and stuff, which that's actually a good franchise, Insidious.
And
She
Critters
falls Oh yeah, Critters, yeah.
also
We
put
have
up
to
on.
review Critters. We haven't.
Yeah,
I haven't watched that for fucking years. So that's one of my favorite scenes. Tangent. The two of the critters is on like the porch. I think one of them says she's got a gun. So what? And she comes out and she blows one of them up. The other one goes fuck.
yeah. What's funny too, because I just touching on Critters real quick, also put up by New Line Cinema. It's funny when the bounty hunter who's able to morph just by looking at somebody, there's that sees the Freddy Krueger on the billboard and
Oh yeah,
then temporarily starts turning into, so that was kind of a funny little crossover.
yeah. We'll
Playmate.
have to watch it. I haven't
Yeah.
watched it for a long time. We'll have to watch it, but yeah. So like I said, Nancy falls asleep in class. She sees Tina's she sees Tina in the body bag. Centipedes comes out of her mouth and all shit like that, and chasing her. And there's one of the famous scenes. She bumps into someone in a red and white jumper. Turns out to be the hall monitor. Where's your pass? Screw your pass. Hey,
Yeah.
Nancy, no running in the hallway. Great scene.
And that was another thing. Going back to the psychology, is Wes Craven was reading on what what color combinations were the most grating, like the hardest for the eye to process, and that's where he found that red and green, that kind of dark, dirty red and that kind of forest green, were the most clashing for the eye to process, and that's what became the stripe color scheme for Freddy's sweater. So
His sweater is actually different in this one to the rest because in this one you got the red and the green. Correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, but the arms are red. But then later on, you got the stripes on the sleeves as well.
yeah, it is a little different.
Yeah, so they changed that a little bit. But yeah, so that was a great scene in the school and stuff like that. Like I said, just building that horror up. So like Nancy's now he's main tag now, but next big death scene we see is Rod in prison, and well, she's in a dream, Nancy, and she sees Freddy walk into Rod's cell. So she wakes up, and you see the his bed linen, his sheet going around his neck. I think they've done it with like fishing hook, like fishing wire.
No, you can almost see like just the speck of the end of the wire, I think, at the end of
Yes,
the sheet as it's kind of going
yeah,
around. I imagine they shot that in reverse.
they did.
Um,
Yeah,
right. And so, but she sees Freddy from the street because she sneaks out of her
yeah,
house and she's seeing Freddy walk through the bars and look up, and so that's he's already in her mindset because she brings up as they're comforting Tina before Tina's death, how they're and she starts kind of describing him as, hey, I had like a similar nightmare with like a similar guy. He's got like a claw, like he's got 4 knives on his hand and like a dirty old hat. And then you see Glenn, Johnny Depp's character, kind of look up, and then you start to notice that they're all having very similar
yeah.
appearances by this
Because
mad shitheel who's
because
terror.
because I've seen that by some people who watches it. They say, well, why did Glenn die? Because he was denying it. They said he's not having nightmares. But when you actually watch it, like you said, when they're talking about Freddy, look at his reactions when he's looking and paying attention. He's having these nightmares as well, but he's just not talking about it. And it's
Right.
just that little. It's just I love subtle stuff in movies. Everything is so in your face these days, but then little subtle things like moments is like, oh, he was having the nightmares as well. Uh, I love it.
And Wes
But
Craven talked
yeah,
about how nervous Johnny Depp was. Obviously, it's his first film, but just how he felt like he wasn't doing a very good job, and he was trying like so very hard to do the best he could. And Wes Craven kept kind of calling him down. I was like, "No, you're doing great. You're doing great." Like, I mean, I've never heard a, a even a regular just word about Wes Craven,
mm,
much less a negative word. Like everyone who worked with him just absolutely adored him, loved him. So, an actor's dream to be directed by somebody that has, that much kind of patience and compassion. But
well,
and then,
before we get to the next big death, so one of the most legitimate actors on the movie, the late great John Saxon, obviously Enter the Dragon fame amongst many other films. He was great in his role as John Thompson.
right. Um, yeah, he was the name of the production. Um, he had he appeared in a film called Cannibal Apocalypse uh,
Oh,
in the
yes,
early '80s, late '70s. I'm not sure, but yeah, he and amazing. He came back for part 3 as well. So
yeah,
yeah, I thought he added so much weight and gravitas, right, as they say, to this production as the father. Who is also somewhat kind of in denial as the story moves along. We start to unravel a bit and understand that her mom, who's an alcoholic, and is seemingly very caring about Nancy having all these issues. She takes her to the sleep doctor. And her I don't know if you want to call it like a broken home, but it seems like obviously the parents have had better days between them. The
yeah.
father, the father is working all the time as the lead chief of police, and they're both in denial that this is what's going on throughout the course of the film until it's too late.
Mm.
Um, so but yeah, Rod appears to have hung himself, and it's things start really intensifying, and we start moving into yeah.
Final act, really. So
Yeah, and they shot this thing throughout all of LA. That the
yeah,
actual Nightmare House is like right in the heart of Hollywood, um, just off of Sunset Boulevard. on Genesee Street, and it looks. I mean, if you drive by it, it looks exactly as it does in the film. Although there was a blue door featured in the film, and it's since been red. Like everyone thinks
Yeah.
of the Nightmare House as like having a red door, but it's oddly it
You can
has.
see the house in the background of our stream at the minute.
Oh yeah, there it is.
Yeah. So I mean, because we'll get to the next big death in a minute, but so I think that was meant to be the original set. In fact, this was going to be in LA, but to me, it seemed like going forward. Did they actually build it? In fact, it was Springwood, Ohio, or have I got
Yeah.
that wrong? Yeah.
No, throughout the film, it's I mean, yeah, Springwood, Ohio. It's not Springwood, California, right? It's Springwood, Ohio. So uh, I don't think he would. I mean, later on, the Scream franchise that took place in California.
Yes.
Which, funny enough, Wes Craven has his cameo as the janitor wearing the
Fred.
floaty sweater.
His name's Fred, isn't it?
Yeah, thanks, Fred. That's so good.
Well, it was the Fonz, wasn't it? The Fonz was the principal.
Yeah, the
Wait,
principal.
you talking to me? No, not you, Fred.
Right. Which Scream also completely flipping the horror genre on its head, and so there's two massive franchises that Wes Craven's responsible for. Just absolute legend.
So the next big death, and like I said, this thing with this movie is only 3/4 deaths in the movie, but Glenn, so he's watching Miss Need America on his portable TV, the good old days, and
shirt,
got his headphones on, and all of a sudden Zam reaches round to him, drags him into the bed.
This was the death that bothered me the most, because not having known who Johnny Depp was going to become, like this mega star, right? Glenn was just a very likable character. He didn't he wasn't a pushover either, because he kind of like
he slipped the rod a couple of times.
Yeah, there's nothing to not like about this guy, and so you're also you're like, no, like, but that's the beauty of how well this was done. What's the point of having main characters if you don't give a shit when they die? And that's one of my issues with so many horror films since, and especially modern horror films, is the characters just aren't written or performed in a way that makes them likable. So when they get killed, it's like, good. They couldn't have killed that person fast enough. Like, finally, don't have to worry about it anymore.
This whole franchise, I think I can name every team in the franchise, actually, because they do work on these characters, and you don't have to relate to a character, but you know what this character traits is, and you know who they are. Whereas, like I said, I love Halloween's, I love Friday the 13th, but a lot of them characters, you forget the names.
Yeah, you
just there for the body count. More Friday the 13th than Halloween, I would say. You forget the names, because it is just the bodies. Friday the 13th. And like I said, I love the movies, but Freddy traditionally has like not a low kill count. He still kills at least 3 or 4 people at least in the movie, but still, compared to like the other movies where there's like 7 or 8 victims, maybe he's is normally around about 3, maybe 4 people. I mean, fuck. In the fucking next one, shit, he only kills like 2, 3 people again. Well, except from the pool scene, but we'll talk about that another day. So Glenn's death, he gets ripped through the bed, and a couple of scenes later, you see this fountain of blood come out, and
same room, the same room on a gimbal, and they flipped it upside down and just put gallons of blood, theater blood, stage blood through the hole, so that it just poured down like a waterfall. Obviously flipped upside down, it looked like it's shooting upwards, and they didn't really think or take into account all the wires for the lighting, and it caused a massive blackout on the set. and I think they like the blood was pouring off the room, and they ended up like losing grip of it, and the whole thing kind of started to tumble. It was like
Yeah.
pretty disastrous, but
Yeah.
an insane visual. You know, the visual is incredible. Again, for not having CGI. So
Have you seen the deleted scene of that death where Glenn's Johnny Depp's body comes out of the bed?
comes out and kind of flops down on the bed there. Yeah,
Yeah, I prefer the one what they kept.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely,
because that
absolutely.
amount of blood, that amount of blood, obviously there's more than 7 pints, but
Yeah, and the sound of it too. Sound of it. I mean, it sounds like just a rushing of
yeah,
liquid, of blood, just like, and
yeah.
it's it's terrifying. You know, really terrifying visual.
So I mean, after this, Nancy does a Home Alone tactic. She sets up all these booby traps to pull Freddy out of the nightmare. She wants to get her father to run across with the police.
We've
So
also
she succeeds.
discovered at this point that her mom, reveals the whole story about who Fred
Ah,
Krueger
yes.
was, and that he can't hurt her anymore. And like that's one of the things I thought was like really interesting was that the mom kept the glove.
So nice.
Like, he can't hurt you anymore. His mommy killed him, basically. Like we
Hey, well,
torched him. Uh,
it's,
yeah,
don't king shame. Don't king shame.
right. Yeah,
Might be, I think.
I've got this fancy little glove in the boiler in the basement downstairs.
Shave her legs.
We could have, that was another one of those amazing visuals was Nancy in the bathtub. That whole bathtub scene is just incredible. Making this tub deeper, for example, than what you see, which obviously it's covered up by the bubbles from the bubble bath. But I think, I would like to think that the bubble bath scene in Nightmare on Elm Street had a similar effect on young girls that, say, like Jaws did for people going into the ocean. It's not to say that people were like, "Oh my god, like I'm scared to take a bubble bath," but I would imagine like there had to have been young girls or guys too, for that matter.
I don't think that's. I'm
I
a
don't
shower
think
guy.
yeah. But just to have that thought of like, hey, don't fall asleep in the bathtub, you could drown. I think that's something her mom warns her about. But also just kind of relaxing in the bathtub and something creeping up between your legs, and then there's a knock at the door and then it kind of like retracts. I believe that was also Lou Carlucci underneath
I think so. Yeah.
having that bit there. And so it's just insane. The creativity is just unmatched. That's why it's like you've never seen anything like it. But yeah, like you said, going back to the Kevin McAllister booby trapping of the
Yes.
house. Uh,
She does drag him out the dream, and her father eventually makes it over, and she opens the door, can't find him because he was set on fire in the basement, but she sees these footprints going up to her mum's bedroom, like on these flame footprints, and they go in and they see Freddy on top of her mum, like on fire. They put the sheet over.
I mean,
This
some other
scene
effects.
confuses me.
What about them? I want before we forget about some of these other effects, like that were amazing, and I think added a lot of fear in people's minds. Was for anybody watching or listening to this who's probably Gen Z or millennial or whatever. We used to have these things called landline phones, and they were connected to the the phone, the
Wall.
cable, or yeah, the wall. It was like
The
a
wall.
phone, and you would put it on a receiver and take it off, and it had like a coil. So there's the scene just after Glenn's death where the phone rings because Nancy's saying like whatever you do, like don't fall asleep, like I need to stay awake or whatever. But the phone rings and she picks it up and it's like, I'm your boyfriend now. And the tongue comes out of the phone and licks her. She throws it and smashes it. Apparently, she kept that, right? Like that's one of
She
the
did.
things in
Yeah.
production at Lagenkamp.
Don't know what she done with it, but you know.
Tongue, yeah. But yeah, going back to like that running up the stairs. I'm trying to remember what the original idea was for that, but uh, I think, or like Bob Shea wasn't a fan of how they.
I think
It was like the
I think
oatmeal and Bisquick or something they filled in the holes on the stairs so
Bob
that her feet were sinking into
Bob
the stairs.
Bob Shea wanted that. That was Bob Shea's idea, and
Cool.
it's great when
Yeah,
you know her feet sinks into that is a great scene. And yeah, I think it's just
absolutely.
oatmeal.
Yeah, and
Uh,
Bisquick.
because you've done that in dreams as well, like nightmares. You know, when you've been running, but it feels like you're in sinking sand or something like that. Like you're not running fast. You know what I mean?
Oh
So
yeah,
that's something else relatable. But yeah, Freddy kills her mum. She like they rip the sheet off, and her mum's a skeleton, and she gets lowered into this fog on the bed, and the bed's nice and crisp afterwards. It's nice and level. Her dad walks out the room, and she's facing the wall, and all of a sudden you see this thing rise out the bed and like steam and like she's like kind of like melting, and like he's about to kill her and shit, and she's like, "I'm not afraid of you. I'm going to take all my power away from you." So she basically doesn't fear him anymore. She
yeah,
opens as she's opening the door. He lunges, but like separates, and as she walks through the door, it's bright daytime next day, I guess.
he's like a weird kind of like gravelly, kind of whimpery like howl at the end. That's
And
cool. Don't don't feed into your fears, and they can't hurt you, right? That's kind of the underlying message here. Uh, don't feed into your fears; they can't hurt you. If you feed
so
into them, then of course they're going to affect you. And
so her mother's there. Looks like she's sober. She looks great, and she sees Glenn, Rod, and Tina pull up in Glenn's car. So
yeah, they
this
wanted
was
a happy ending, right? They wanted that Wes
what
Craven.
Wes Craven. If it was up to Wes Craven, the film would have ended here.
No, they wanted
But
this big happy.
I think it's kind of like who do you back? And at the same time, I back both of them. I back Wes Craven because he's a genius, and I back Bob Shea for seeing the vision that yeah, this could be a franchise.
Yeah,
And there was all these so the end scene before we get to the final end scene. She gets in the car. The roof hood comes up because it's convertible. The roof hood comes up and it's the red and green stripes. The doors locks themselves, and Glenn's like, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. And the car drives off.
yes,
Um,
striped roof.
that's right. You see the girls skipping. 1, 2, 3, come for you. And Nancy's mom gets ripped through the little window in the door.
Looks kind of just like didn't notice that anything was wrong. I was like, nah, it's a nice, beautiful day here in Springwood. The glove bursts through the window and grabs her, and they suck the doll through the little hole there. Apparently, that was the whole shot without Wes Craven's knowledge.
Wow.
Could be wrong.
I mean,
Apparently added that in. He was like, fuck, like what the hell?
yeah.
Because he had no intentions of this being a franchise or having a sequel.
No.
And I think they had Freddy as the driver originally in the convertible. They had tried it like a version with Freddy as the driver, and that got ixnayed. But then, like at the beginning of part 2, you see him as like the driver of the bus.
Yeah.
So they kind of wedged that in there, but yeah.
So that's Nightmare on Elm Street. So before we get to some fan questions, so everyone, if you want to send in some quick fan questions, we'll answer them for the next 10 minutes before we get to the fan questions. Paul, Nightmare on Elm Street. I mean, if we're going to give it, if we're going to go a 5-star system or whatever out of 10, where do you rank it?
To me, it's maybe I'm biased, but to me, it's as perfect as a horror film as you can get. It still
I
holds up.
agree.
I think people who say like, "Oh, it's dated," there's nothing dated about it. Um, sure, some of the effects might look a little wonky, but for this being in production in what, like 1983, released in 1984, also, you know, it just it had so many things kind of working against it. Um, Nobody, again, credit to Bob Shea, because they at New Line. New Line was originally just really a distributor. They had just
Yes.
put out, I think they even stepped in and were the original distributor for Texas Chainsaw, possibly. But they were originally a distributor, and this was like the first real, hey, we're putting everything we can into this as like our production.
Yeah, bet
And
the house on it.
yeah, that's why, whenever you hear things about New Line Cinema being the house that Freddy built,
It's
and
legit.
it's legit. Yeah, it's legit. And so then, when you fast forward to New Nightmare, which I feel was one of those really early films to kind of take, it's an overused term, but like that meta, self-referential kind of story. Before Scream, there was New Nightmare, and that,
Yes.
I feel like that kind of set a lot of those seeds as well for what would become Scream. But a lot of these things play into the horror tropes of, did Tina and Rod have sex early on? Possibly. They slept together, so like, gotta kill them, but then you think like Johnny,
Jungle
Johnny
Man
Depp,
makes Jane happy.
yeah, Johnny Depp wanted to. He was trying to get a little freaky with Nancy, but she kind of passed off the advances because they were there for Tina, not to get freaky. Um, and maybe that's why Glenn ended up, succumbing to the Miss America pageant, but Nancy survived, at least for now.
At least for
Um,
now.
yeah,
So,
but
well,
the mom, she's just uh, overprotective, alcoholic mother. I think she slaps Nancy at some point, I think, in this film, doesn't she? Like, isn't there a I might be mistaking it,
forgot.
but parents are rough, man. It can be tough being a teenager, especially if you live in Springwood. So,
Yeah, I've got about 4 more years left before I've got a teenager, so
oh,
we'll see.
right,
Cool. So we'll
yeah.
answer a few of these fan questions. So we've got 10 more minutes, everyone. So if you want to send some in now, please do so. Broken Ascendancy question is, does Robert Englund want to do another one?
I've heard that he obviously he loves the character that he truly ended up creating. Like, a lot of people talking about Bob Shea, he was uh, there's mixed thoughts or like takes on, for Nightmare on Elm Street 2, which Wes Craven didn't want there to be a sequel. They were thinking like, no, we are pushing forward with this. This is going to be like, this made a ton of money. We're moving forward with it. According to Bob Shea, Robert Englund's agent wanted a ton of money, and according to Robert Englund, it wasn't that at all. It was that he was, again, banking on V continuing on and getting like picked up and moving forward with V, because that's where he was really making his money. And so he wasn't able to fully commit schedule wise, because he was like, well, hold on, I'm still waiting to see if we're going to do something with V. And they wanted to kind of rush into like Nightmare on Elm Street 2. So we're like, well, you know what? Why do we even need Robert Englund? Like, it's prosthetics. Let's put him on, I can't remember the actor's name, but they put it on somebody else, like a stunt guy maybe. And he was terrible. And I think there's a few shots in Nightmare on Elm Street 2, very briefly, of this guy who wasn't Robert Englund, but he was horrible. And Jack Shoulder, the director, was like, no, like we need Robert Englund. Like this guy moves very stiff. He's terrible. And so they fired that guy. They brought Robert Englund back. But you know, from what I've heard on recent interviews with Robert Englund is that he's just that his body maybe wouldn't be able to hold up to that kind of role. You know, it's a 3 hours in the makeup chair at least. You know.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard that. So because of the laws now, the original writers of movies after so many years get given the rights back. So the Wes Craven estate now has the rights to Freddy, something like that. So they're actually opening to that. They're open to pictures, ideas. So fingers crossed, I'll get there. So one of the ideas Robert Englund said he would welcome would be like an animated film in some form, and he could voice the character, and
it just
it'd be weird.
Wouldn't be
it's not the same.
Wouldn't be the same. It's like the Beatles cartoon, which I love the cartoon, but it's not the same. I think it's more of a physical toll on him that, and that also goes back to something we missed, was that glove was so heavy, right? That's what caused his shoulder to dip a little bit. And that's why Freddy has a bit of a dip in his stance. And the further the films, he would kind of model his walk after James Cagney. But yeah, that dip in the shoulder was initially because that glove was so heavy that when he put it on, it kind of pulled him down a little bit. But yeah, everything I've heard of recent was that it would just be such a physical toll on him, because I believe he
must be late 70s, must be.
Maybe early 70s, I would guess, or mid 70s.
Yeah.
I would guess early 70s, possibly even late 60s, if I'm being I don't know. But
it must have been like early 30s when he got casted as Freddy.
Right.
So 84. So yeah, there you go. Say, it's nearly 40 years. So yeah, it must be like 70s.
Right.
So
we could only dream that Robert Englund would come back for Freddy. I know that he's put on the Freddy makeup and done everything for photo ops and things, different conventions. But that's really, he's really living up the convention scene and all that. Good. So we'll hope that we can see Freddy Krueger again someday. We've heard rumors of different actors here and there, most recently Kevin Bacon. I have an actor in mind who I think would be absolutely perfect, but I'm not going to say who because I don't want anybody to steal my ideas. So
we'll share it on the Patreon. So, well, everyone, please subscribe because hopefully one day we can bring Robert Englund on the show. I mean, at the end of this episode, we're going to give you an update on our schedules going forward. So, but we'll answer a couple more not super chats, but questions. Newfoundland Dragon, Pyro, what name? Who is your favorite Dream Warrior?
You go first.
I don't know so much about a Dream Warrior, but he's actually, I would say, one of my favorite characters in the movie is Joey.
Joey,
well, he's got. I like. Well, I mean, he's a man of my own heart. He loves women. I mean, that's
what is it about the Dream Warriors that struck a chord with you?
I don't know. It's just like this guy. He's a shy guy. He obviously can't speak, but
mute.
Yeah, but I don't know. He's just like a guy of my own heart. He's I think they're like 15, 16, 17 in Dream Warriors, the teenagers. He keeps looking at his nurse and he's like, wow. But he gets scared and that Freddy traps him. I don't know. I do like Joey. It's a shame how he went out in part 4. I love Kincaid. Kincaid's fucking awesome.
Joey's kind of, in a way, the savior in part 3, if you think about it, because
Yeah.
once he finds his powers and yells out, and finds his voice, that's what helps his friends burst out through the mirrors when they're being pulled in from Freddy in the hallway. So Joey's kind of the saving grace in Dream Warriors. Yeah, I would go with oh man. On one hand, I would say Philip, even though we never got to see his power,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
The Dream, but and I had the pleasure of meeting Bradley Gregg at an audition and talking to him about it, and he started telling me about how they did the effects with the veins pulled out of his legs and the blood dripping and all that stuff, and we had a really brief discussion about why he's the first one taken out is because possibly he had such an idea about he starts talking about there being like a psychosis and them so he was almost like the biggest threat in a way because he had more of an understanding about what they were dealing with than the others. And so that possibly is why Freddy took him out first. It's just kind of a theory, right? But as a mark, I would have to go with Will. I love the Wizard Master.
Wizard Master.
I think it's so fun. It's such a and my brother.
So stupid though, man. He's got range attacks and he goes in for the melee. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing, dude?
Well, he was trying to put the foot to the throat and make sure that this guy's dead. You know what I mean? Like
fucked up big time.
The wrist, but he knew better. And that wheelchair apparently was like extremely heavy and very dangerous. And so I remember the stunt player who was his stunt double, but yeah, they didn't have him do that bit with the wheelchair because it could have really fucking fucked him up pretty bad. But my brother, I think, still plays Dungeons and Dragons, and he had kind of some big glasses when he was younger, when we were kids, and so we used to call him Wizard Master based on that character. But it's just such a great endearing character. He's just he's so innocent, and he's just like the kid's in a wheelchair. Like, how low can you get, Freddy? Right? And then when they discover their powers, he's like, in my dreams, my legs are strong. In my dreams, I am the Wizard Master. And he's like, he's just such a nerd. But I love him.
In my dreams, I am beautiful. And that she's got the power of the 80s.
So, what was Jennifer's character? What would her power have been? It's weird, right? Or something. I don't know.
He's Robert Englund's 76 this year.
Jesus. So he's like my dad's age.
Wow.
That's nuts. But I mean, if you watch his interviews, he's still very youthful and he's so energetic. Oh, yeah. I would highly recommend. He appeared on the Michael Rosenbaum podcast, and that one's Michael Rosenbaum played Lex Luthor.
Yeah.
But he's got a great podcast, and he interviewed Robert Englund, and it's fantastic. And he's just so talkative and just so lively. So you wouldn't think he's 76, but I think somewhere in there is where I heard him say something about it having such a physical toll on his body. So wow, 70.
Dream Masters did Dream Wars Day. It fucking did. I remember the guy it's like Kincaid.
Yeah.
He did that Never Sleep Again documentary, which it's whole thing's on YouTube. Recommend it highly. Absolutely. And he said he tell his friends, he said, when you get there, go straight to see the movie. Don't get popcorn, don't get drinks, because you won't see me again. I'm going to try and get these people on the show. I would love to get Kincaid because he sounds fucking hilarious.
Sagos, yeah. I mean, to their with the exception of Joey, who didn't really put up a fight at all. At
No.
least Kincaid put
Oh,
up
he tried. Yeah,
bit of a fight and kind of had like a fuck you right before he gets killed, but like I'll see you in hell. Tell him Freddy sent you. And, I love the dog named Jason. Um,
yeah.
one of the I laugh. I love it when Kincaid dumps the old car onto Freddy, and he's like, yeah, yeah. And when he jumps, and then it's like a cut screen, and he's like flying through the air, like Kincaid. And it's just to me, it's just so funny because he's just like he jumps and then he's like flying through
Yeah.
the air down to the
I know. I know part four. I think it is your favorite part four. Am I right in saying that?
yeah for part four, which at the time was the highest grossing of them all too. I
Yeah.
think it's still one of the highest grossing of them all. And Robert Englund has said that that was his favorite
Oh well.
portrayal. Yeah, because um, you know, God, why am I? Rennie Harlan, who went on to do like Cliffhanger and
Fast and
uh,
Furious.
did it, I don't think Rennie Harlan did a Fast and the Furious.
No, he's in the
So
first one.
what?
Yeah, seriously, he's actually got a cameo in it as like a pizza delivery driver. He done the first Fast and the Furious.
He didn't direct it though, did he?
I think he did.
But he did like Cliffhanger. I think I want to say he did like Die Hard 2 maybe or 3.
Yeah, I think he done Deep Blue Sea. I don't know if
He
you ever
definitely
watched that.
did see. I want to say
Uh,
he did the Marine or not the Marine or 12 Rounds. He did one of those Cena movies.
right. He done this like movie. It was called Driven. It was like I call it Formula One. Starred like Stallone and Kit Padu, a couple of people.
Yeah.
He done that. But, I mean, he had a good career, but I'm sure we'll get to part. I mean, I know part four is your favorite.
Yeah, he says that like Rennie Harlan really let him go with the character, and that was like the kind of the crossover phase into it really being what's considered like the MTV
Yeah.
crossover. Even though Dawkins had like that historic Dream Warriors song from Part 3, right? So Part 4 is my favorite though of the franchise. I'm a Rick Mark. That was my favorite character of the franchise.
I'm sure we'll bring him on. I'm sure I'll get him on the show.
Somebody dirty. They did Rick dirty in Nightmare 4. Big time. They didn't even invite him to the rap party. He didn't even get like a rap jacket, like a production jacket. We'll cover that some other time. Jesus.
We'll get there. Well, by the way, it just turned 12 o'clock. It's the 13th of May. It is now my birthday.
Oh, happy birthday!
Thanks.
You never know what
I'm
kind of
25.
Oh, you're 20, you're 20, big 2-5 now?
Oh, yeah, man. In my dreams. Oh, man, I don't care about birthdays anymore. It just feels weird, man. It's just another, year onto the notch onto the belt for my age. But
my horror
oh, man.
right?
Nice.
So get the big Freddy there. The different characters, the real Pennywise somewhere in there. There he is. But yeah, that's front and center. Pretty cool.
Oh, bro, consensus is actually your birthday. 87 on 89, so happy birthday to you as well. And thanks, everyone. So thank you for tuning in, everyone. So as for the future of the channel, so obviously for the past, since the start of the show, it's kind of been like a monthly podcast. We're changing that. So the reason we are now doing live streams, it's easier. And me and Paul, we are Marks for CineMarks, why it's called CineMarks. We can talk about a lot of things off the top of our heads. We watch the films in advance and we do take some notes, but it's mainly off the top of our heads. So going forward, we're hoping to bring a couple of reviews out a month, perhaps an interview as well with movie star, a wrestling personality who's into movies, someone. and perhaps once a month, once a week anyway, um, have just an open episode. So you just send in, oh, what do you think to this movie? And we just go freestyle sort of thing. So
We
hopefully we'll be.
yeah, get more fan interaction. We'd love to get your voices heard. Questions that y'all have, film suggestions that you'll have as well. So, but yeah, we'll be kind of look, if you want to catch a review, like how the films really, throughout, like you're going to be able to find most of these throughout, right? But like we're trying to bring a little something different, and it'll be, a mixed bag, but keeping it with a kind of a live audience. We feel it affords for more interaction. We can take the questions right off the cuff. So, yeah, please leave comments and suggestions, and we hope you all keep on the ride with us.
Yeah, and if you have enjoyed this, hopefully you have. Please hit the subscribe button. We're nearly at 1,000, and we've only had 4 episodes. So yeah, so fingers crossed we'll hit 1,000 soon. And yeah, please support us. Both of us is on Instagram and on Twitter, but we've also got a CineMarks page as well. So CineMarks 123 because CineMarks is already taken. But yeah, please spread the word and support us in this venture. We're going to start bringing out content real soon. Do Jeepers Creepers, definitely on the list. Definitely on the list.
So we can't do Jeepers Creepers until we do Clown House, but there's controversy that mars both productions horribly. We won't focus on the controversy so much. You can look that controversy up. We don't want to. We try to separate whatever happens in real life from our enjoyment for these films. But yeah, Jeepers Creepers. Hey, stay tuned. We'll get there eventually.
Well, everyone, thanks so much for joining us. And yeah, hopefully we'll be seeing you soon, and sweet dreams.
Don't fall asleep too early.